Hello, question number 1, and this comes from YouTube, and he says, 100% true, I have a cane corso or cane corso mix, very fussy eater. She was on a raw diet, but there was no way I could pick up the food and put it back down again, even with refrigeration. It would go stale very fast and start to smell. And this is off a video I did on raw dog food and some of the cons of raw dog food. I am a huge proponent of raw dog food. I love it. My dog is raw fed. I'm a huge advocate for raw dog food. However, I am not sanguine. I am not a preacher of raw dog food for everybody. I do recognize that lots of people have jobs, kids, they have busy lives, they live without freezers pays, for example, and they have dogs who might from time to time be very, very fussy. And so one of the things we do say in our shops to people who are having this very problem with their dogs, and this is something that you can do if you have a fussy dog, is to put the food down, and if the dog doesn't eat it, you just take the food away and you wait a few hours. Maybe you wait until night time and then you do that again. You make it time limited, you take food away, you restrict everything else apart from water to the dog. Make sure the dog is well hydrated, obviously, and doesn't have any sort of health issues. And over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, the dog will eat. The dog has to eat. The dog is not going to starve, unless the dog has something like acute pancreatitis, which in that case you should be taking the dog to the vet as soon as humanly possible. But if the dog is healthy, if the dog is okay, you just need to be a bit tough whenever it comes to feeding your dog if they are fussy. And one of the drawbacks of raw dog food is that food goes bad, you know, it starts to smell after 1 or 2 days. It's fresh and raw meat starts decaying. And if that has happened to you, where you leave the tub out for a couple of days or for a day or whatever, it starts to smell. And so if you have a fussy dog, it might be hard for you to be as strict as if you were doing it with kibble. So yes, if you have a dog and they are raw fed, one of the cons is that you cannot really do this technique. You can't really take raw meat with you and train the dog, for example, which is another thing that we do advocate for whenever people come to our shops. What is the best way to train a dog? And we always say that, well, a hungry dog is an obedient dog. So if you can take treats with you, you can take kibble with you and you feed the dog as you go, instead of the dog eating and then trying to train the dog. That can really benefit your dog's training. It's a lot harder to do with raw dog food. So yeah, that's one of the cons of raw dog food. Is it great? Yeah, it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. I just think that fresh is always better than processed, whether we are talking about McDonald's and a feta cheese salad, or we are talking about the pet world, the dog world. Fresh is always better. Is it for you? I don't know. That's something you have to ponder. And we have a few videos here on the channel that you can watch and you can instruct yourself. So yeah, thank you so much for the question. Second question, is Canagan still independently owned, as in it hasn't been bought by Mars or Nestle? Thank you, just subbed. Thank you so much, and do like and subscribe. It really helps the channel more than you can know. And the question relates to Canagan. So Canagan is a UK brand of dog food. It sits at the upper echelon of the dry dog foods in the UK, and they use mainly freshly prepared ingredients. They do contain sweet potato and potato as the main sort of filler in the food. Nevertheless, it is a pretty good kibble. Why is it a pretty good kibble? They use very good ingredients and they are independently owned. They only supply local pet shops. So if you think of your big box stores or supermarkets, they do not supply those out of principle. So they are very principled people. The owner is a very interesting guy, actually. He started with his own small pet shop and then made a food catered to pet shops that would only be sold in pet shops. So they have never really compromised on ingredients, and that's one of their tenets. And it's a great thing to do, actually, because you can actually rely on them whenever you recommend a food, a single protein food, for example, or whenever you recommend a specific recipe for a dog with an allergy or whatever. You can rely on Canagan because they are not going to be swapping and changing the ingredients within the recipe. Now, in recent times, say the past 2 years, they have hiked their prices quite a lot. They have gone from a pretty standard good price to a very, very pricey sort of kibble, and they actually were going to hike the price even further, and they chose not to because they couldn't really justify that to the end consumer, so they ate the cost. And so one of the solutions, or the solution they came up with, was that they would move production to Germany. So they have moved now production to Germany, and if you feed Canagan, on the back of the bag you will see made in Germany. Now, we have a pretty good relationship with Canagan, and we have communications with Canagan, and they haven't changed any ingredients. They haven't changed anything apart from the manufacturing process, and it just means that the food is no longer made in the UK. The food is now made in Germany. In my opinion, here in the UK at least, if you go to your local supermarket, a lot of the beef you buy is from New Zealand. A lot of the avocados you buy is from Mexico. A lot of the salads and pears and stuff you buy is from the Mediterranean countries. And so the fact that Canagan has moved to Germany doesn't really mean anything because the ingredients are still the same. Has Canagan been bought out by Mars or Nestle? No, it hasn't. It's still independent. I think it's going to remain independent. You have to sort of understand what has happened in the past 2 years in the pet food industry. Every few years, whenever we come into a bit of a tough time, a bit of a recessionary period, a lot of companies run out of money, and a lot of companies disappear and others appear. And one of the things that tends to happen whenever there's a very fragmented industry or a very fragmented sector like the pet food industry, where you have thousands and thousands of products, is that people do go out of business and others get acquired. So we have seen in the past 18 months a lot of companies that have changed hands. Acana and Origin are two of those, and some of the big three are a lot bigger than they were when the whole thing started 3 to 4 years ago, the recessionary sort of transition period. But Canagan is still independent, and so yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it. If they changed hands, if we saw something with Canagan, we would tell it as it is, because we aren't sponsored by anybody and we can therefore tell the truth. We're pretty transparent. Thank you so much. Next question. People, dogs and cats are designed to process organic proteins and nutrients that are found in fresh food. the inorganic synthetic stuff that has no to be added to processed food is what causes most of our problems. And this is from Ed. Thank you so much for your question. So there is a huge thing going on at the moment, and I hope you stay tuned for this, because I'm going to have a discussion with Dr. Judy Morgan very, very soon. So stay tuned, please subscribe and please like. Whereby a lot of companies are pumping up these recipes in dog food full of additives, full of things that are incredibly processed to our dogs. And especially in America, I see this especially in America, and especially in a lot of the lower quality kibbles in America, whereby the list of ingredients is like a full Bible, and it's unreal the amount of ingredients, the amount of preservatives, the amount of additives that we get in the food. Here in the UK, we have companies putting wheat gluten, corn, barley, rice. We see a lot of potato. We see too many legumes. We see sugar. We see dextrose, and we see things like meat and animal derivatives that really, really do grind my gears. And so whenever we talk about the best food for your dog or the best food for your cat, there is really no better way for you to distinguish a good food from a bad food than for you to read the ingredients. And by you reading the ingredients, and by the ingredients being maybe a handful, you can then ascertain whether that dog food is good or bad. If you turn the bag of food over, and that bag of food contains 1,000 ingredients and additives and supplements and vitamins and whatever, that's because the food, the ingredients that go into the blender aren't very good to start with. So why are we giving our dogs some of these dog foods? When it comes to fresh food, I'm all for fresh food. I think fresh food is a lot better than processed food. You cannot convince me that KFC is better than boiled organic chicken that you buy and prepare and you add a very nice salad to it. There's just no way you can convince me of that. Yet we feed a lot of our dogs some foods that are completely inappropriate, completely just really, really poor for our dogs and cats. And so if you want to be obese, if you want to be prone to diabetes, if you are happy eating very ultra processed foods, then so be it. But if you are in this sort of line, and if you are looking at your dogs and cats diets, the best way for you to discern whether what you are giving them is good or bad is to read the ingredients, to try to tilt toward fresh ingredients as opposed to ultra processed ingredients like Ed says. And yeah, the inorganic synthetic stuff that has to be added to processed food is what causes most of our problems. If the ingredients you put in a food aren't of good enough quality, that you have to put then so many additives to it so that it's nutritionally good, then that just means that the ingredients aren't very good to start with. And so I couldn't agree with this more. So yeah, fresh food, try to do more of it. Processed food, try to do less of. Is the inclusion of chickpeas and lentils of any concern regarding DCM cases and recent evidence? what a topic this is. Dilated cardiomyopathy, DCM. And this is like heart condition in dogs basically. And these came out back in 2018, 2019, where the FCA and a few other bodies and papers started coming out with papers and scientific support that would say or tell consumers that high levels of legumes like chickpeas and lentils and that sort of thing, beans, all that sort of thing, would risk dilated cardiomyopathy, the blockage or the not reception of leptin by the heart, and that would be something for you to worry about. And at the top of the list came Acana, Signature, Taste of the Wild, 4Health, Earthhorn Holistic, and Blue Buffalo. And there was a few others like Origin, like Merrick, like Nature's Domain, like Natural Balance, California Natural. But the main offenders were Acana, Signature, Taste of the Wild. Now, if you look at some of those original recipes like Acana or Taste of the Wild back then, and you looked at the ingredients were phenomenal for kibble. They were fresh chicken, cartilage, organ meat, freshly prepared beef, fresh beef, raw pork, raw salmon, raw herring, raw pilchard. Origin, incredible ingredients back then, I mean. And so my assumption when I saw this was to think that these companies are really starting to make a dent into the big three, into Purina, into Royal Canin, into Hills Scientific. People feeding Acana. We're not affiliated with Acana, Origin, or any of these companies, by the way. We can say whatever we want. And so whenever some of those bigger companies, the Purinas and the Royal Canins and the Hills, start losing market share, a pretty good hit piece would be to identify your biggest competitors and the companies who are trying to take market share away from you and come up with some pseudoscience or some paper that would support your claims. To this day, there hasn't been any concrete evidence for or against or proven or disproven. I just think that a bit of common sense in this regard really does play a part. We have the very, very low quality kibbles on the market, and I'm not going to name names, but if you bear with me, we have meat meals, meat and animal derivatives, we have the corn, the wheat, the barley, we have rice, we have extremely cheap ingredients on here. And then we have fresh chicken, raw beef, raw pork, fresh salmon, dried herring, whatever. And then in order to bind the kibble, instead of adding wheat gluten or corn or barley or rice, which is very, very cheap, we are going to put potato, sweet potato, chickpeas or lentils or any other legumes. Now, are legumes or chickpeas or lentils biologically appropriate for dogs? If your dog were left to their own devices in the wild, would they go out of their way and eat lentils or chickpeas? The answer is no. Perfect. Okay. Now, having said that, is wheat gluten biologically appropriate? No. Right. So neither of them are biologically appropriate. We sort of understand that. Now, if neither of them are biologically appropriate, which one is better in your opinion? Rice or wheat gluten or corn or maize or meat and animal derivatives, or fresh chicken, chickpeas, or some lentils? I'd rather have a few lentils than corn or wheat gluten in my dog's food. Sorry. Having said that, there is no concrete evidence on DCM being caused by legumes. There's a possible link, there's a possibility that DCM, heart disease, might occur whenever dogs are fed high quantities or some legumes in their dog food. All kibbles need carbohydrates, need starches to bind them together. Otherwise, you have no pellets. You have none of that. There is no ability for the kibble to be bound together. So you need some starches. Now, in my opinion, I rather have chickpeas in my dog food than wheat gluten, and especially some of the poor ingredients that a lot of these companies put into our dog food. So what was the original question? Is the inclusion of chickpeas and lentils of any concern regarding DCM cases and recent evidence? Recent evidence is cherry-picked. As always, in the pet food industry, you can find things for and against your claim. And so, no, I wouldn't really be concerned unless you feed your dog a can of chickpeas every day, and then that might come with bloat and so many other things that could potentially go wrong. I rather my dog eat certain legumes as opposed to corn or wheat gluten. And so if you have any questions, please let us know. If you want to speak to us, www.thepetquarter.co.uk/consultation, or click in the link below. I'll see you in the next one.